Hi guys, it's Erin, and it is time for my 2018 book year in review video. So first I'm going to share some stats about my reading year, and then kind of like throughout will be some kind of reflections on my reading year. And I'll also talk a little bit about my channel. I don't really want to focus on that, but I'll throw that in at the end. So I initially at the beginning of the year set my Goodreads reading goal to 75 books because I didn't really know what my reading year would look like. And then in January I read like 20 books and I think not long after that I bumped the goal up to 100, which was my previous challenge, which I had made. But I actually ended up reading 164 books, which is mind-blowing. I have no idea how I did it. I can't believe that I read that many books. This is definitely the most books that I have read for a really long time. When I was like a kid and even in high school, I read a ton, probably a couple of hundred books a year. But since like college and stuff, my reading has definitely slowed down. I still read a high volume of books, but a lot of those are school books. Just for some perspective, in 2016, which was the first year that I counted my reading, I read 84 books or something like that, and in 2017 I read 107. So this is just like a dramatic increase. Like I said, I don't know what happened. It was great. It's not going to happen again for a while, but it was exciting. So I had 3 kind of reading goals that I shared when I started this channel, and that I made for myself in January of 2018. I felt like I hadn't read a lot of classics the year before, which wasn't true, but I did reread a lot of classics in 2017. I wanted to try to read more new classics. So I made a goal for myself to read a classic work every month. And while I didn't actually finish a classic novel within each calendar month, I did kind of, my goal was to read 12 classics, and I definitely achieved that and more. So in total I read 30 classics this year. So of those 30 classics, 6 of them were books that I read for school in the fall. 9 of them were books that I reread for various reasons. I feel like this is still a pretty good number. What that boils down to, if I'm doing my math right, is that I read 15 classics that I just picked up on my own that I had never read before. And of those 15, I read Anna Karenina, which is a huge book, and I also read Middlemarch, which is a huge book. It made me feel better about the amount of classics I'm reading, and I definitely can call this challenge accomplished. If I can read 15 classics next year on my own, that would be amazing. Or this year. It's 2019 now. Life and time. My second goal was to read an early modern book every month, and this did not happen. I think I read like 3 Shakespeare plays, and then I got into the meat of my thesis, which was about a Shakespeare play, and I didn't really want to spend my spare time reading different Shakespeare plays because I was just like so focused on that, and then the goal kind of fell by the wayside, which is fine. I'm actually taking 2 early modern classes next semester, and so I will certainly get plenty of reading in. Would it have been nice to kind of have met this goal? Yeah, but it's okay. I don't really care. I'd kind of forgotten about it. The other goal was to read a work of adult literary fiction every 2 months. I made this goal because I just kind of wanted to broaden my horizons, become more familiar with adult fiction and with adult literary fiction in particular, and I more than accomplished this goal. It actually ended up being 11% of my overall reading. It works out to 17 books as opposed to the goal of 6, so that is almost triple, and it actually is more than triple because I also read 2 books for school, so 19 total that are I consider literary fiction. These are books that you find in the fiction section of the bookstore that are characterized by a kind of certain standard of writing, that have plots that are more character driven, that are generally just more literary than like entertaining, although I found a lot of them quite entertaining. And guys, I enjoyed most of them, which is kind of surprising because I didn't really expect to. That's why I said only one every other month, because previously my experience with literary fiction, even if I enjoyed what I had read, I found it kind of heavy, kind of depressing, kind of just like uninteresting. It felt like a chore to get through. But a lot of the literary fiction that I was reading was for school. And sometimes I feel like professors choose works that are provocative intentionally, whereas there's a lot of really beautiful literary works out there that are just beautiful. And I think genuinely there was only one that I really didn't like. So, yay me. So those were my 3 goals, and I feel like overall I did really, really well. I'll talk a little bit more now about some just general stats and percentages. I always like it when people share these in year-end wrap-up videos, and I like kind of looking at this. These are sort of rough percentages because I don't like numbers, and anyway, I got myself into a little trouble and then didn't feel like going back to fix it, but it's close enough. If you are interested in seeing all of the books that I read this year, all 164 of them, I will link my 2018 year in review from Goodreads in the description box. Go ahead and go and check that out. I read 30 classics, 19 books that I consider literary fiction. I read 56 books that were young adult, and a couple of those are middle grade. I read 30 books that were adult, just kind of like adult books, but not literary fiction. Most of this was fantasy or science fiction, and probably next year I'll kind of like distinguish that. I have a fancy spreadsheet now. I read 6 graphic novels. I reread 16 books, and this is mostly young adult and a handful of graphic novels. And I read 6 nonfiction books. 6? Really? And here is a chart that shows you the percentage breakdown. Basically, 18% of my reading was classics, 12 was literary fiction. I only reread 10% of the books that I read this year, which is pretty good. 4% of my reading was nonfiction. I'd really like to increase that this year. It's sort of like a secret goal. I didn't put it on my goals list, but it is something that I'd like to work on. 4% of my reading was graphic novels, 18% was general adult, and 34% was YA. So you can see how, even though I kind of broke up the fiction, I have like age category and genre kind of together, 34% of my reading was YA, and even if you just include the adult and the literary fiction, that ends up being about 25%. And if you add in classics, then it's, again, like 40%. So slightly more. Something I found really interesting while I was counting my different books is that between January and May, I read 32 new young adult books and reread 5. And then from May to December, so that's not 6 months, that's 7 months, I only read 19, so almost half. And if you look at what I've read, there was a little flurry at the kind of like end of August, beginning of September. That was kind of like the remnants of my summer reading. But once school really got going, I only read 4 young adult books. Now my reading in general decreased, but my reading of young adult definitely fell off a cliff. But on the kind of like same token, except for the books that I reread that I really, really loved, and like a handful, those books that I read between January and May, I couldn't even tell you what they were. When I scroll through the list, I'm like, oh yeah, I read that book this year. Like I said, there are a handful that I really enjoyed, but most of them were just kind of generally forgettable. The ones that I read since school began, of the 4, I thought 3 of them were really great. So I found that really interesting. Not because I have anything against young adult, but because I noticed that once school really got going, I was reading a ton, and it doesn't, the volume of my reading for school is not reflected in my stats because I only recorded books when I finished all of them, and I didn't actually read very many whole books this year. I had some textbooks that I read like 3/4 of. I had some and I read a ton of essays. I was reading like, probably a lowball estimate would be about 500 pages of material a week, and that's like intense material that needs a great deal of focus. So because of that, which was I enjoyed all of that reading. Like, I have signed up to do this, I am enjoying this, but it's a lot of work and it impacts my kind of personal reading, my unassigned reading because it just takes a mental toll, and also takes up time. And I knew that going in, and I like, don't read this as a complaint. This is just how it goes. As a result, my reading time became much narrower, and I was a lot more kind of deliberate about my reading choices. At the beginning of the year, basically from like January to August, I kind of just picked up whatever sounded interesting at the moment, and that definitely contributed to my reading volume. I was just plowing through books. I went to the library and I had so many books. There are a ton of books that I didn't read that I wanted to get to, but just like my interest kind of waned, so there was kind of these little like sparks. I'd hear about a book and I'd grab it and I'd read it or not, and then kind of move on. And like I said, a lot of the books from the first like half of the year basically are ones that I don't really remember. I enjoyed them. I think I only read one book this year that I really disliked. It was definitely a quantity over quality kind of thing, but I think that was good because doing that volume of reading kind of helped me assess what kinds of books I really like, and that allowed me in the fall semester to find those books that I really liked. And instead of reading the ones that just sounded like fun and interesting, I was able to pick up books that were just like really deeply enjoyable. That's kind of the gist of my 2018 reading reflection. I was really interested to see how my reading kind of morphed over the course of the year. I got back into reading new young adult fiction at the beginning of the year and just really enjoyed that kind of like romp through all of these new and interesting books. It's kind of December, January is sort of when I started watching BookTube and suddenly was just like overwhelmed with recommendations, whereas the past couple of years I had kind of struggled to find something that was interesting. I kind of knew what I wanted, but I was having a hard time finding those books, and so I'm so grateful to finding BookTube and Bookstagram for just like helping me start to find those different books and helping me think about reading a little bit more deliberately. It's been really great just to be like a viewer on these places. So the beginning of the year was just kind of like flood of things, and as I went on, I started to kind of recognize the kinds of books that I was genuinely interested in versus the ones that just sounded fun but I like didn't necessarily care about, and I was able to start discriminating a little bit more in my reading, which is important. Like, you have to discriminate. There's so many books out there, and more are being published every single year. It's important to both kind of open the floodgates occasionally and try a bunch of different things, but then close them off again, or you'll just like continue to be overwhelmed. And so I think that's kind of what I did this year, not just with classics but with adult fiction too. And I think that this next year I'm really looking forward to kind of taking what I've learned about my reading tastes, what I've learned about the current book market and what's out there and being published right now, and what I've learned about the past and about classics, and just really kind of take that and run with it in 2019. Then finally, I said I would say a couple of things about my channel and stuff. I didn't include anything about my channel or my Instagram in my like goals video, and I know a lot of people who do those things do that, but I want this to be a thing that I enjoy, and I don't ever want it to be about the number of followers or something like that, the number of videos that I put out, because I don't want to put pressure on myself or make myself feel like I'm failing at some kind of arbitrary goal. I just want to enjoy myself and connect with people who like books too, and I am doing that in both of the places. Thank you so much to all of you guys who have followed me this year. I started this Instagram in March, and I think I have 70 followers. I think today I checked and I had 70 followers, which is just kind of amazing. I know that in the grand scheme of like the YouTube world, 70 followers is not very many, but I just like, there are 70 people out there in the world who enjoy looking at my face and listening to me talk about books, which is really exciting because I'm just like a little nerd that likes to talk about books. And I'm really thrilled that you guys are here along with me. Thanks for sticking around. I feel like this year for BookTube, I've kind of been learning what I want my channel to look like. I started by just kind of copying what I was seeing, and I realized that that's not quite what I think is true to me and how I read, and so I kind of pulled the pedal off a little bit, and I used this fall, even though I didn't upload a lot of videos and I didn't like do anything super different when I did upload videos. I've kind of used this fall to think about what I want this channel to look like. I know I can't go full speed ahead, and some of my ideas are going to be kind of time consuming, so they might just show up when I'm able to do them. I don't want to talk about things that I want to do and then like have it 5 years pass before I actually get to them. But some things you can kind of anticipate in the coming year. I noticed that a lot of people really liked my grad school vlog, and I know that some of you have said you're here for the grad school stuff and that I haven't done anything about grad school. Mostly, again, just because I didn't have a lot of time in the fall semester, and then once it ended I felt like I had to do all this end of the year stuff. I will, in the month of January, at the very least, post a video where I talk about what I'm taking in the spring semester and share some of the stuff that I'll be reading, and I also will post a video where I kind of reflect on my experience from the fall semester. I had a great semester. I'm really loving grad school a lot, but it is just like really time consuming, and that makes it hard to juggle these things, so I kind of tend to default to the really basic stuff, wrap-ups and things that are easy that I don't have to do a lot of work for. That will change after the spring semester. My schedule's going to lighten up, so hopefully I can kind of start to be a little bit more active just generally. But grad school videos, I'll probably continue to do wrap-ups because I like the opportunity to kind of think about my reading, and it's a great way for me to recommend books to you and kind of tell you what I thought about the books that I am reading. I would rather privilege wrap-ups over TBRs because I feel like my TBRs, especially during school time, are, hey, these are some interesting books that I probably won't read. I'd rather do a wrap-up and tell you about the books that I did read and what I thought about them and why I liked them. I think that's more useful. It's certainly useful to me. The other thing I'd like to do more of, I would like to do more discussion videos, specifically of classics, and to discuss them from a kind of like, not a review perspective so much as like a genuine like discussion, the kind of thing that I would do if I was writing like a short essay or something, or talking about the work with a class of students. I think that especially classic works that are a little bit more challenging and require a little bit more kind of mental work, can feel intimidating to people who aren't used to reading in that way. And I'd like to kind of just make some videos that would kind of give you some tools and equip you to do that. I've seen a lot of people say like, oh, I'd love to read classics, but the ones that I pick up are boring, or, you know, I'd love to read classics, but they just like take me so long to get through and I feel like I don't understand what's going on. That is kind of like what I'm doing. I'm learning how to explain things about books to people. It's like, what does a PhD in literature do? That's what it does. It teaches you how to explain complicated books to people through writing and through teaching. So why not do that in the channel, since I'm doing it already? So those are just a couple of things that you can kind of look out for in the coming months. I'm not going to promise to upload with any kind of regularity. I will try, but I'm sure, as with the fall semester, at some point I'm just not going to have the time. But don't worry, I won't go away forever. And anyway, thank you so much for watching this video and all of my videos. You guys are awesome. Let me know in the comments how your 2018 reading was. Did you learn anything about your reading that surprised you, or read anything different, a different genre, a different book, a different age category that just like surprised you by how much you liked it? I'd love to hear those kinds of things in the comments, and thanks for watching, and I'll see you in my next video. Bye.